Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Xandermonium. Yes, it's Sunday again. Today we will be having a special guest, Brian Bowen, author of The Bedkeeper, and we will be discussing some taboo topics: abortion, the death penalty, and the separation of church and state. All very meaty issues for your education, entertainment. More to come in a mere moment. You can interact with us during the show in the chat room. You can call us also on 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. If you want to ask a question and you're not brave enough to call in, you can tweet me on at Xander Gibb, Xandergibb. That's Xandergibb. Tweet me if you're too shy, and we'll make your point for you. And you can tweet Brian at The Bedkeeper. That's THEBEDKEEPER. That's THEBEDKEEPER. The Bedkeeper. Capital T, capital B, capital K. So don't forget, at the end of the show, as per usual, we'll be doing our section, What's Your Beef? You can call in and tell us who's pissed you off this week, who's made you want to slap someone. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's Brian. Maybe it's none of us. Maybe it's your neighbor, whoever it might be. Hello to everybody in the chat room. Hello to all the guests. Your opinion is important to us, so feel free to make your comments. We will be reading them out during the show. And you can tell us what you think. So don't forget to check out, as usual, every Saturday, the Jake Pentland Show, 1 p.m. PST or 4 p.m. EST, with Jake, Jen, Eli, Susie, and all the crazy cult of Jake peeps. You can be sure that Jake will be talking about his genitalia, as it seems to be common ground on his show. But make sure you check in and tell him that Xander sent you. Also, check out his sisters, Brandy and Jenny, on their show, Time Out Seat. I'm not sure which day it's going to be on, but check their Twitter page for more details. That's at Time Out Seat, TimeOutSeat. Hey to Travis, who just joined us in the chat room from the Robin Trav Show. Make sure you check them out every week, Mondays at Tuesdays at 8 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. PST on Grindhouse Radio. Check them out. Tell them Xander sent you, and I'm sure I will see you there. So just before we get into things, I have a little message for Twitter. Dear Twitter, next time you decide to email me and rebuke me for harassing someone, more specifically objecting to someone making anti-Semitic comments to me and my friends, at least have the balls to give me the evidence rather than just take the word of some bitch who gets her friends to complain because she's been outed as a Nazi. I will not now nor ever succumb to the bullies, whether it be in person or on the internet. So take heed, Twitterati scumbags, and get out of my frickin' face. There you go. I got that off my chest. So, at a time when America needs to unite to become great once more, we instead are spending our time infighting about some of the biggest hotbed issues, including abortion, the death penalty, and the separation of church and state. Both liberal and conservative media in this country feed that divide in what I believe is a deliberate attempt to further separate Americans on issues that we may never agree on. there has to be some point where we can either agree to disagree or find common ground and unite to make our great nation the greatest once more. We are spoon-fed every single damn day a diet of hate. Hate those who are different to you. Hate those who disagree with you politically. Hate those who are of a different religion to you. Now, unity will not occur in this country while we are waiting to agree on everything. This is America, not utopia. So today we're going to look at some of those issues that cause divide and why some groups are using them to divide us further. Now, as I said at the foot of the show, my guest today is an author, and he's never short of an opinion, and he's no stranger to the Xandermonium show. Please welcome back once more Brian Bowen. Good afternoon, Brian. How are you?
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm very good. It's a very dull day here in New York, and it's humid, and I think the weather kind of tends to affect your mood. I know it does with me. How is the weather there in Texas?
It is beautiful, but it's a little warm. So, it's Texas. But, yeah, it's great. Beautiful blue skies, and, yeah, it's home.
Cool. Yeah, it's been kind of nice here this week, but it's kind of been up and down, and then we get the rain. But I think we need the rain to get rid of that humidity somewhat. I just wanted to point out for some people who are having trouble getting into the chat room. Apparently this is due to an issue with the Blog Talk server. It's not working very well with Internet Explorer. So if you're using Internet Explorer, you might want to try and get in with, what's it called? Either of the other things, Google Chrome or Firefox. Clear your cookies and your cache and hit Central and F5 on your keyboard, and that should get you in. I'm getting some messages saying that people can't get into the chat. Hey, Joe. Welcome to Joe to the chat room. Kathy will probably try and be in very soon. She's trying to frantically get into the chat room. Okay, so we're going to talk about some real hotbed issues today, Brian. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready as I can be.
Okay, well, the first thing we're going to talk about is abortion. Now, Roe established that the abortion right must be considered against important state interests in regulation, and that a trimester threshold of state interest in the life of the fetus corresponding to its increasing viability, i.e. its likelihood of survival outside the uterus over the course of the pregnancy, such that states were prohibited from banning abortion early in pregnancy, but allowed to impose increasing restrictions or outright bans later in pregnancy. Now, that was modified in 1992 because of the case Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which upheld the central holding in Roe, but replacing the trimester system with the point of fetal viability whenever that might occur, obviously outside of the womb, as defining a state's right to override the woman's autonomy. Now, that was modified in Casey and remains in place, although the effective availability of abortion varies significantly from state to state. Now, I've always been of the opinion that, as a man, I have no place to tell a woman or anybody what they might or might not do with their body. However, having said that, with the recent cases in mind of Kermit Gosnell and Douglas Carpin performing late-term abortions well beyond the legal limit, these things can't be termed as anything but murder. Clearly this is happening elsewhere and needs to be addressed. And if there are legal requirements for abortion, it should be strict and monitored, surely, in order to ensure that these atrocities don't happen. So where do you stand on abortion, Brian? Are you pro-life? Are you pro-choice? Are you both? Can you be both?
In general, I am pro-choice in the fact that ultimately the decision rests with the woman. As a faithful Christian, obviously, I have a lot of reasons to oppose abortion for really any reason outside of the life of the mother, and as many Christians do. But, even in that, even when you add that caveat, you're still saying it's up to the woman or up to the doctor. So there's still going to be a choice involved. And certainly as a man, I'm in no place to tell a woman what to do.
No.
My family is filled with women. I would not want any of them to have an abortion, but I'm not the one who's pregnant. But having said that, for me, in my study of the scriptures and LGBT people, Jesus teaches that there are born eunuchs, and they're born for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. So I've got another angle that would really it would guide my opinion. It should not necessarily be law. But the thing I think that a lot of people, especially in Christian circles, really overlook is the fact that 10% of all abortions are going to be gay babies, if statistically speaking. And so there is a certain amount of a compelling reason for us to want to see a reduction in abortions, but to outright ban them is not going to stop them. And I have really come to the point where I think rather than shaming women who've had abortions and putting all the responsibility on them, we need to start looking at the fathers of these unborn babies and find out what happened there.
I couldn't agree more. Because surely contraception is sorry, I spoke of you. Surely contraception is a dual responsibility. It's not just for the man, it's not just for the woman, it's for both people to consider. Because if you're not ready to have a baby, I know this simplifies it all, because sometimes when you want to kind of get it on for a better for want of a better phrase, the last thing that you're thinking about is contraception. However, it is a dual responsibility. It's not just for the man to think about. It's not just for the woman to think about. Surely it has to be a dual responsibility.
I absolutely agree. One of the things I think is really unfortunate is the mostly Catholic, but not only Catholic, but the largely Catholic position of not using any contraception whatsoever. And I understand the principle behind that, in that, just as no one should be deciding when someone should die, no one should be deciding when someone should not be born. But you never hear them say anything against vasectomies or a woman having her tube tied. It's all the medical and prophylactic use that they seem to focus on, just like they seem to focus only on the woman. I just don't understand how celibate priests, find the authority to stand on to make these edicts for people that they've never met. They don't know their situation. They don't know their circumstances. The man and woman, when they first copulate, may have decided, we're going to get married, and 6 months into the pregnancy, he's tired of waiting for the baby to come along, so he goes off and finds some other friendly woman. And next thing you know, she's like, well, if you're going to cheat on me now, you're going to cheat on me afterwards. Maybe I shouldn't even have this baby. There's situations that are so varied that
absolutely
never even come up in the conversation. It's really
every situation is one that's totally unique. But to go back to what you said about the Catholic approach, my other issue with that is that using contraception is not just about not having children, it's about preventing STDs. And if you're telling young people, see, this is the thing, if you tell young people don't have sex, they're going to do it anyway. I did. I'm sure that the young people today are doing it. But if they're going to do it, maybe they should, consider kind of doing it responsibly. But if you was a religious organization, and I have all day to talk about my problems with Catholicism and the Catholic Church. If you're going to tell people not to use contraception, how can you be surprised at the increase in the rate of STDs, being on the rise?
Exactly. It's really, first of all, the church, nobody would have to be telling children don't have sex at an early age if children were not having sex at an early age. That's just kind of a course of events that is largely out of anyone's control. I really think, though, that we do a disservice to our children and, by extension, our society at large, to continue to not take common sense medical approaches to making sure that these children aren't born prematurely in the fact that they're not born before their parents are suited to care for them. You know, at one point, especially when you hear all about the child abuse cases in the Catholic Church, not just sexually but otherwise, you really have to start to wonder, you know, how many of these kids are being shipped off after they get too old to adopt, being shipped off into the sex traffic trade. And so, you know, and it makes you wonder what the motivation really is behind the Catholic Church's prohibition on, you know, contraception and not wanting to adopt out to same-sex couples. Is that what are you going to do with these kids instead? And and if they are actually feeding the sex traffic trade, let me say it like this: I think these kids are coming from somewhere, and I think we should start to look at adoption agencies, Catholic or otherwise, and see if we can't nip that in the bud as well.
I think that a lot of the Catholic ideologies, the reasoning behind them that does go a hell of a lot deeper, and the more I hear about things that are going on in these circles, the more astounded I become at these things, and it's not just the Catholic Church, because I think people get the impression that I'm anti-Catholic and anti the Pope. I'm not. I'm just for the protection and preservation of the morality of young people, and when these issues occur, we have to speak out, because when we don't, that's when the problem arises. I wanted to ask you, because you live in Texas, don't you, Brian? How has your state reacted to the information that's come out about this abortion doctor who has an abortion clinic that's still open in Texas, Douglas Carpin? There was videos on the internet of these nurses talking about things that go on in these places with late-term abortions, where the doctors are physically putting their hands inside the woman and snapping the neck of the child, the fetus, the child, whatever you want to call it, that's alive inside the womb, and then pulling them out and discarding them like garbage. How has your state reacted to that information?
I think Texans react just like they do react to horror just like anyone else would. Doesn't matter what state they're in so much. We are a largely evangelical state in that there's, we're the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, but there's still a lot of patches of liberal people as well, and they're just as horrified. We've got to wonder who's minding the store here. There's
you hit the nail on the head.
Abortion being legal is one issue, but those responsible of making sure it is done legally is another. It seems there's a lot of somebody's dropped the ball somewhere, or these cases would be happening the way they are. It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
But for me, it's another kind of example of we put these safeguards in order, but we don't want them to be policed. Hell, I want them to be policed. I really, really do, because when you've got these late-term abortions going on, it highlights that it's happening. And if it's happening in the two cases that have come out in the media recently with Gosnell and this other guy, this guy in Texas, it's happening. It's surely happening elsewhere. I will always be pro-choice, because, like I said, it's not for me to tell people how to live their life. But when I hear stuff like this, I'm torn. Who is policing these places? Who is making sure that they don't do these things? I wish I'd never watched this video, but in this video there was it showed you evidence, it showed you the dead fetuses, and these were like, I mean, I've seen children. I was there when my sister's baby was born, and I've seen a baby fully formed coming out of the womb, and they look like that, and these fetuses, these babies had been, had their necks broken and things like that. I mean, it made me cry. I know I'm a big old puss because things bother me, but surely anyone with a heart is going to be bothered by this kind of imagery.
Yeah, I mean, horror is horror. We are all affected by it by the same way. I think even those who support a woman's choice to choose, I don't think anyone who is pro-life is actually pro-abortion. I think the pro-life folks try to paint us that way, but it's really a misnomer. It's not a matter of being pro-abortion.
You're absolutely right.
It's a matter of trusting. Yeah, it's a matter of trusting women to make their own decisions. But
absolutely.
Our government, but our government is just, whether it's the IRS or abortions, they're charged with making sure these things are done within the legal guidelines of the law. And when they're not, we need to hold more, in my opinion, we need to hold more than just these doctors accountable, so-called doctors. We need to hold the government agencies charged for making sure this kind of thing doesn't happen in the first place.
We do.
And send them to jail just right along with them. They are an accessory to these crimes.
Let's just go to the chat room for a minute, because I've been a bit neglectful of them. Travis has just outed himself in the chat room as a Catholic, and he's openly Catholic, and he says, in his opinion, the abortion issue will always remain unresolved, and I have to agree with that. Hi to Michelle in the chat room. Thanks for joining us. Hi to Jamie, is listening as a guest. Joe said he got found guilty on 3 counts of that and 1 of manslaughter over sedating patients to death. I'm just in such shock about this. I really am. I can't get that imagery out of my head, but I think that in a way it's kind of important to sometimes see those things, because if we don't get shocked by anything anymore. Oh, apparently that was the doctor who slashed spinal cords. I misread some information that got the 2 counts of murder. I think we have to be shocked by this information, or we never do anything. We never changed. Oh, and apparently I misread. Travis didn't say he's openly Catholic. He said he's openly anti-Catholic. Hi, Kathy. You made it to the chat room. I'm really glad. Sorry I didn't say hello to you earlier. I didn't see you come in. I'm glad you got your issues sorted out with regards to getting into damn Blog Talk's chat room. So, do you feel, Brian, that have we become unshockable about these issues, do you think?
I think 9/11 really raised the threshold for everyone. It is, like you say, very hard to shock us anymore. But I do think that anyone who was not shocked and not, did not have their conscience affronted by what we've seen through the Gosnell case, they need to check their pulse.
Right.
There's one thing, like I say, to have a philosophical or political position on civil rights and medical reproductive rights for women in our country, but it's quite another to see when that fails. And I'll say this too, I think that the 50 million abortions since Roe v. Wade is one of those failures. I don't think making abortion was legal was ever designed to increase the amount of abortions we had. One thing it did do, though, is have us to start counting them. I think before Roe v. Wade was passed, I think women did have abortions. They just weren't counted. And so, one of these things, one thing to take into consideration with our increased population around the world since 1973 to begin with, I think we're twice as many people as we had then. We're obviously going to have more cases of murder, abortion, everything else. But when you really do start to count the costs, which is what I hope the Gosnell case will cause every American to do. When you really do stop to count the cost, it makes you wonder, are we as a country, as a society, willing to not be affected by these things? In other words, are we willing to not be shocked? If we aren't, why aren't we? And shouldn't we be? But should we overturn Roe v. Wade, and should we start prosecuting women who have abortions? No. I think I think that's the other ditch on the other side of the road. You're right. We should be torn. We should have our consciences searched. I just don't know that. I don't know at this point exactly what we should do instead. I think having larger public education about contraception, perhaps even at an earlier age, so that we can prevent the need for abortion, is a good step. And I think holding fathers responsible. I think holding fathers responsible is also a good step. If we passed a law that said for every abortion we're going to castrate the father of the aborted fetus, I'll bet abortion would stop overnight. I don't think anybody's really going to get up and say that. But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't think it's all on the woman, and
no, and it shouldn't be, because let's face it, it takes two to make a baby. It takes a man and a woman, and I'm in a way. Somebody asked me about this on a radio show I did the other day. They were asking me about my opinions on abortion, and my first point was that, I'm glad I'm not a woman, and I will never be in that position where I have to make that choice, and I would hate to be in that position to make that choice. I have a very close friend who had, last year kind of had that dilemma, and most of her friends were saying, "Oh, get an abortion or do this." I don't think it's an enviable position to be in, and to advise someone either way is really a grave concern, because it's one thing to help your friend to weigh up the options, but to tell them to do one or the other is kind of quite concerning. And I think what we're tending towards is we're so spoon-fed in the media, both liberal and conservative. One side is for, one side is against. We're kind of always torn, and I think that we tend to get a little brainwashed by all of this, and I think that that's alarming, because when we don't question things, when we don't think for ourselves, then surely something is wrong. I mean, it's imperative for as I said to you, I'm pro-choice. I always have been pro-choice. I probably always will be. But all this, Gosnell stuff has made me be shocked and surprised by it, and have to readdress my thinking on the situation. And I don't think we should ever be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I also think we ought to be careful. The other side of this is, a lot of people have used the Gosnell case to explain why abortion should be illegal. What Gosnell did was illegal anyway. So
Absolutely.
To say that, and then I hear this evil, the word evil being thrown around, that, abortion is evil and what this doctor did was evil. And to me, if you can't separate those two, you again need to have your conscience examined. To say that women who are having abortions to prevent or to terminate a pregnancy, to prevent finding themselves in a situation where they have an unwanted child that they're unable to care for, and call that evil. She's making a responsible decision with the best facility she has at her disposal. She's not going out killing babies that have been born live from the womb.
No.
There's a huge difference. And so I think that's the other side of this point. They need to be examined as well. You can't. They do,
and there's an enormous stigma placed upon these women, and we shouldn't be judging people unless we've actually walked in their shoes. It's so easy to say that it's simplistic and black and white, when frankly it's not. Joe in the chat room says she agrees with you. She agrees with that, Brian. I think she's referring to your last statement. Kathy says, I love the gays, and so does God. Amen to that, Kathy. Joe says she likes rituals, but she can't buy the main part of confessing to priests instead of talking to God yourself, or last rites after you're dead. Kathy says she's not for abortion after the third month. Yeah, I think. What is it? What is it currently? I know it's different from state to state. Is it? It's after third trimester, isn't it?
I think in most cases it is, and I'll be honest, I don't even know how they determine that, other than, like you say, based on the likelihood of a fetus surviving on its own.
Right.
I wouldn't want to make that decision either,
No.
But again, the other side of that is, well, abortion is okay if it threatens the life of the mother. You're right. There's so much gray area there, and I think that's what makes it an issue that we should be using, that we should be examining with our full conscience and weighing the cost on both sides of the issue. And like you say, you're right. The media and those organizations that feed into the media, whether it's Planned Parenthood or Heritage Foundation, both have a bent on the issue, and neither really explore the areas. All they do is create the conflict so the media can sell the advertising. That's all media cares about. They just want you to tune in so they can sell advertising at the highest rate possible. They don't really care what the story is anymore. They don't really care what all the nuances involved are. All they want to do is make sure there's, two sides to the story that are very clear and distinct, and they don't want to examine the gray area. I guess they figure the American public is either too stupid or not interested enough to explore that gray area with them to devote any airtime to it. Is really, really sad. But
I think for me, as a big part of my evolving is that I question things more and more, and on what I think that is preventing Americans from coming together are the differences. I mean, I've even heard people say, I don't want to be friends with people who are pro-abortion. This is the thing. Should we all have to agree on everything? Should we all have to have the same ideologies to get along? In the last few months, my evolution has been political too. As you know, I've left the Democrats, and a part of that has been about seeing that there's kind of wrong and right on both sides. And surely in everything, some people are so steadfast in their beliefs and ideologies that they won't even discuss it with you. And to be honest, my sister said to me that I've been like that too in the past about political things. But in order to open things up for discussion, surely we've got to be able to be willing to at least look at someone else's point of view and opinion on any situation.
I agree. I think a lot of our problem nowadays is that there's so much money to be made in politics that people feel compelled to choose a side and read all the cue cards, whether they agree with them or not. I guess there's something that says, if I was in this political foray, I'd be able to make a difference. And the only way to get into it is to be the same. It's a catch-22, and people are falling for it left and right. It's just like all of the anti-hate towards gays. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Even when they know better, even when they couldn't possibly agree with what they're saying, they say it anyway because that's what they're paid to do. And I think the more we wake up to those kind of things, it'll be the same way with abortion. I think the more Americans wake up to those sorts of things, the more we'll all be comfortable saying, you know what, it's not as clear-cut as people try to make it out. I'm not as settled on one side or the other. I agree with a lot of the points on this cue card, but not all of them. But, they're so afraid now to disagree with anything on the cue card because, like you say, that means, we can't be friends. You can't be part of this camp. And what it's doing is leaving a lot of Americans all in the gray area. And that's why I think the, political parties have such a hard time gaining a real majority. This 51%, 52%, yeah, that's a win, but it's not the majority that would really represent the country as a whole. And instead we see all this conquer and divide and using the media to just constantly condition each side, here's your cue cards, here's your talking points. And I have a theory
as to why that is, Brian, and I think that's while they keep us infighting, that we're not actually looking at the changes they're making without our knowledge. Like look at the gay marriage bill going through. The Obama administration used that to put a bill through the back door, and to me it's like There you go. Look, it's free pizza. You know, I've talked about this before. And whilst they're giving you the free pizza, they're actually saying you can't have pepperoni pizza in the future. You know, if we want this level of transparency, then it has to be across the board. Because don't be, as a Democratic administration, saying the Republicans never show us transparency, and then the Democrats kind of doing the same. Apparently, I'm not allowed to say "gay" and "through the back door" at the same time in the same sentence. Thanks, Kathy. I'll keep making note of that. Thanks for joining us, Michelle. Michelle has to leave now. We love you, and we will see you next time. Okay, well, let's I think we have a bit of a consensus on this here, Brian. Now, some people would say that you can't be pro-choice and pro-life, but I kind of think you can when you respect the rights of both the mother and the fetus. But I do think that there needs to be greater awareness and accountability on what is going on.
I absolutely agree.
Wow, this is probably this is probably a great moment in Xandermonium history, because we don't always agree on this show. But that's the beauty of this show, where we don't have to always agree. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the death penalty. Don't worry, your favorite subject of church and state, I thought we would leave that to last, because I'm sure we both have lots of opinions to share on that one. So, regarding the death penalty, in the United States, currently 32 states have the death penalty on the statutes, although not all states use it frequently. In 2008, the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled that the use of the electric chair as a method of execution violated the state constitution. With no alternative method of execution on the books, Nebraska is practically without a death penalty. In 2004, the New York Supreme Court ruled against the death penalty procedures because it violated state constitution. The legislature made no effort to change the procedures, effectively eliminating the death penalty in the state. This time last year, there were more than 3,200 people on death row, and more than 18 people had been executed. Death sentences numbers diminish every year, and more than a dozen U.S. states have now abolished capital punishments. Opponents say there is no way to know how many innocent people have been executed in the U.S. over the last 40 years. More than 130 people have been released from death row. Three strikes laws are in effect and enacted by state governments and mandate courts to impose tougher sentences over those convicted of three or more serious offenses. In most jurisdictions, only crimes at the felony level qualify as serious offenses. Now, depending on the seriousness of the current and prior crimes committed by the offender, the offense can range from a minimum of 25 years to a maximum of life imprisonment. The law significantly increases the prison sentences of persons convicted of a felony who have been previously convicted of two or more violent crimes or serious felonies. Some countries even impose a mandatory death penalty for those caught trafficking drugs as a deterrent measure, and the appropriate rate of such harsh penalties has a mixed response, and it is an issue which causes much divide in our country. Do we have the right to play God? Are there alternatives to preventing recidivism? And is society to blame for all its failures? So, Brian, let me ask you, is the death penalty a gross misuse of power, or is it necessary evil in today's high crime era?
I'll be honest. If someone in my family was murdered, I would support the death penalty for the person who committed the crime. But there will always be a certain amount of that's not going to bring them back. And there will always be a certain amount of did we get the right person? As long as that gray area exists, I don't know how we can. It's sort of like abortion. I don't know how we can ignore the gray areas, and I don't know how we can say we have absolutely never sent anyone to their death by accident. Because of those reasons, I'll say it like this: I'm for the death penalty where the death penalty exists. I'm not going to be a person who tries to repeal the death penalty. I'm not going to be one of those advocates, and I will respect the states and jurisdictions who do not have the death penalty. That's the only way I really know how to deal with it at this point in my life. I'm only 46, and I've never had anyone in my family murdered. I'm sure, growing older and a real-life experience would color my opinion as I went along, but that's where I'm at now. I think we need to have some sort of deterrent, but I'm also very opposed to putting someone life in prison and having the taxpayers continue to make sure they have oxygen and food. For what? They're going to die anyway. I'm not really sure what the point is of, in that case, prolonging it. On the other hand, we've still got reasons to, bring someone to a permanent end in cases of war. Look at Osama bin Laden. What should we have done with him? Obviously, he's one of those that if he had come forward and turned himself in and went through the process, I could see them saying, you know what, at least you met us halfway. We'll do life in prison and, put you somewhere. But, if you look at somebody like, I don't know, say George Zimmerman, who shot Trayvon Martin. If it turns out he shot him in cold blood, if there's a way that we can prove it, if I don't know if Florida has the death penalty or not, but if they do and they convict him, yes, he should be put to death. If you take a life, you pay for it with your life.
Right.
Although,
having
said all that,
go on.
Jesus said, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind. I'm torn. I really am torn.
I think this is the thing about all of these issues. We're always going to be torn, Brian. But I think that when we don't talk about them, then things never change, and we never kind of change our value system. Now, Jo just pointed out something really interesting in the chat room. She said, "I don't think you can know until you go through it, Brian," and I kind of have to agree. Now, I'm not going to talk specifics, but I kind of tend to agree with that, but what I think is that this is the thing. The families of those affected by crime, when you have had someone killed in your family, surely that must change your ideology. God forbid, if someone killed one of my siblings or even one of my close friends, I'm sure the initial response is that you want that person to be punished. And if your loved one, whoever they have been, has lost their life, surely it's an understandable level of response to kind of to want that person dead.
Yeah, it's one of those things where is this justice or is it revenge? And
right.
Who can decide? I really don't know.
I see that.
I wonder if a happy medium, for lack of a better word, might be that we'll have the death penalty unless the families of the victims say, you know what, we've heard this case out. In this case, we will not seek the death penalty. Or in this case, we will seek the death penalty. If the state has a death penalty, assign it. If they don't, if they do have it, but the family says, yeah, but don't go ahead and do it, I think the family should have some say in the matter. It should go beyond the lawyer in those cases. But
me too. In fact, in some countries, I know in some Arabic countries, they can ask for, if someone's son has been killed, they can ask for the death of a son in that family. I think it's kind of an odd system, but I just think every country has their own way of doing things. Before I just go to the chat room, let me give out the phone number. Call in and tell us what you think about any of these things: abortion, the death penalty, the separation of church and state. 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061. Call in, tell us what you think, and we can chat some about that. In the chat room, Joe is saying, hell yes, Florida will execute a retarded 15-year-old child. Now, I thought that would actually be seen as cruel and inhuman. Also, it costs the state, it costs less to house a prisoner for life than it does to keep them on death row and pay for all of their mandatory appeals. Joe also says, justice is mine, saith the Lord, that shall not kill. I see all of these points, I really do. But I think that until you've actually been a victim of crime, again, it's like, come back to me when you've walked a mile in my shoes. But it's very difficult to actually speak into each individual situation. We all have a different set of experiences. We all kind of have different opinions about things. But once again, I've heard people say, oh, well, if you're pro-death penalty, I don't want you over my threshold. I mean, frankly, if you're going to tell me what I'm supposed to think, say, and do, then I don't want to come over your threshold.
Exactly.
It's kind of a concern.
Yeah, I think one of the basic human rights is right to our own conscience. Because, who can say they still feel the same way about a lot of issues today than they did 20 years ago or 10 years ago or before 9/11 or after 9/11? Events in our lives change our perspective and they change our reaction to those things. So, who can say? If you don't have a conscience that's constantly exploring these issues and constantly growing, I'm not going to say I don't want to cross your threshold. I'm happy to be friends with whoever, no matter what the issue
hey,
is.
Me too.
Agree with on.
Me too. Even homophobes.
Yeah, to make that a litmus test for your friendship is like, okay, I got better things to do than to prove I'm worthy of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our regular listeners and one of our friends from the Cult of Jake, Kathy, was on the show before, and her son was murdered, and she's anti-death penalty. And Travis is also saying in the chat room he's not into the death penalty himself because there's too much of a large margin for error, and people are kind of agreeing with that. What about this 3 strikes and you're out concept, Brian? What do you think about that?
Well, Texas does that as far as whether or not you're going to stay in jail, and I don't think it necessarily has to be about murder. I think it's a lot of different crimes. In that sense, I think in one way it encourages you to be criminalist 3 times instead of just once. I'm not sure that it really serves as a deterrent, because so much damage can happen between crime number 1 and crime number 2 before you can even get to crime number 3.
Right.
And not only that, but that also, once again, it makes a black and white statement that the taxpayers have to pay for that 3rd time when you're locked up for life. The taxpayers have to pay for that from now on, when the 3rd time might have been a nonviolent crime, for example. I do think we need to look at what we criminalize and what we don't criminalize. It's like marijuana. I'm for decriminalizing it. I'm not for legalizing it. In other words,
so tell us what the difference is that for you.
Yeah, for me, it's like if you get caught smoking a joint, we're not going to put you in jail. I think we should charge you a fine. But I don't think that we should say it's legal for everybody to smoke a joint if they want to. And I say that.
Why though, Brian?
Yeah, it's not because I think marijuana is, quote, that harmful. I smoked marijuana for years and years and years and years, and so I can't say that I've had any ill health effects about it. But what it does do is, in my mind, made it easier for me to experiment with other drugs. In other words, they say it's a gateway drug. Indeed, for me it was. I don't know if it is for everyone. And so to to say, okay, this is going to be legally available to you no matter what, I think there should be some parameters around that. And the other side of that is, well, alcohol is legal, and it's sometimes even more dangerous, if you get behind the wheel of a car. But yet I wouldn't say we should make it illegal either.
Right. But the argument, but you see, and in my mind, my response to that is that not everybody who drinks is going to go out there and kill someone. You're not, I mean, I know a lot of people that smoke weed, and good luck to them. I don't do it anymore. I wish I could. Not just because of the legality of it, but because I have asthma and stuff. But it's natural, it's grown, it's a plant. I can see the argument for it. It's got medicinal effects, but you're far less likely to have someone that smokes pot go out and shoot someone and kill someone, or drive a car and kill someone, than with alcohol. I mean, it's far less lethal. And the arguments, the health arguments, kind of about it are kind of odd, because if you don't smoke it with tobacco, it's not been proven that it's necessarily harmful. And some people will say that it's not even addictive. I mean, I had a problem with marijuana addiction, but I'm addicted to food too. So there's no maybe just people have an addictive personality. Travis just said in the chat room, even peanuts can cause death. No one ever dies from marijuana, I guess, unless you're a drug dealer and someone shoots you and takes your stash. But I see the point. I don't think that marijuana personally is a big issue. Now, I never used to be. I used to be so anti-death penalty. I used to think that it was not appropriate, not right, because there's too many mistakes and all of those points. However, the three strikes and you're out thing, there are certain elements of society that will just continue and commit more crime. But my response to that as well is, do we have such rates of recidivism because the penalties are too weak, or have we just become kind of complacent to all of this?
I think the rate of recidivism comes because we release these prisoners. They now have a prison record. It's very hard to get a job, and it's very hard to support yourself other than the life of crime they knew before. Most people who are dealing drugs are doing it for one of two reasons, either to themselves financially or to support their own drug habit.
Right.
Oftentimes, it's both. If that's the only way to make a living, you get a record, it's very hard to get a job after that. And I think there's a lot of good programs coming along that help people, make that transition to get them gainfully employed again. But I think that's part of the rate of recidivism is because of that. It's just so hard to put your life back together after you've been to prison that I think sometimes they, at least they knew their life there. It wasn't pleasant, but neither is the one on the streets. They at least had, their own territory. They didn't have to worry. They had a certain amount of separation from other people. They had a certain amount of, rights to their own domain, I guess, for the lack of a better word. And so I think some of them may view prison as a better situation. And, if we're going to keep putting them back on the streets and not really get them into jobs,
right,
we can expect recidivism to be on the increase.
Surely a part of the prison system should be a rehabilitation kind of ideology, that you get people to look at why they've done what they've done. This is the thing, I didn't have a particularly wonderful childhood, but I never went out killing anybody or stealing from anybody. So it's not always, an environmental or societal thing to blame. Some people are just going to be that way, But I do think that what is important that while they've got you in custody, they should attempt to effect some kind of change with you, whether that's to teach you a trade or whether that's to make you to behave differently or whatever that might be. Kathy just shared in the chat room. Sorry, I just wanted to share this before the page goes up. Kathy said she believes the person who killed her son Tom will end up back in jail because most of them do, and I can see that. But why do we all want to apportion blame? If you commit a crime, it's down to you. Whatever crime you commit, why do we all want to apportion blame? It's the mother's to blame, it's the school to blame, it's the fact that there wasn't a father. We all want to explain it away somehow.
Well, it keeps us from having to take any responsibility for it, and I think that might be just a human instinct, especially when you're facing a problem that's so overwhelming, such as these questions. We can talk about them from now until kingdom come, but I think there's a sense of helplessness when we really don't know what the solution is. And I think one thing that's important to do is to continue to try to develop new solutions. It seems to me that we as a society, we often put a Band-Aid on things and, count how many times it happens. We don't really ever try to do anything to bring those numbers down. We don't really try to do anything to, interject something in the dynamic that sends the future on a different trajectory, it seems. And then we do. Martin Luther King will come up and, give us all a new perspective. A John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln. It's happened in our society. It's just so rare that it happens. And when it does happen, our media is usually not interested because, that's
because that doesn't sell newspapers, does it? They want to sensationalize all this stuff because they actually want to, springtime and tulips don't sell newspapers, but robbery and murder and all these things do, and the concern is that things will never get better. Well, we all feed into this stuff because we all watch it. It's like when we complain about reality television. We all say how it takes work away from actors and it's this and it's that, but we all still watch it. We feed into this situation, and it becomes a circular problem as far as I'm concerned. It starts with us and how we behave and what we do. That affects the change, because you can't change me, Brian, and I can't change you. We can only start with changing ourselves,
Exactly.
But I do feel, again, I come back to the same point, about with regards to the death penalty. We as a society, I think we've become numb to it. I don't know if it's a deterrent anymore. I don't know if people are scared. Someone said something to me the other day, an older person said about the reason why we have so many problems in society is because of the lack of discipline as people grow up, because mostly if you have a disciplined upbringing, you are less likely to kind of be out of line as you get older. I don't know how true that is, but I see the methodology, I see the thinking behind it, because when I was a kid, you were afraid to kind of talk back, but now I see kids nowadays and they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue.
Yeah, I think first of all, what you just now described is another one of those. In that case, though, we're blaming the parents. I think as long as we continue to assign blame, we put off people having individual responsibility. And I know that's a word nobody wants to hear, but I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
If you go out and shoot somebody, they're not going to arrest your parents because they raised you poorly. It really is going to come down to who pulls the trigger. It's the same thing with just about every one of those situations. like I say, with the exception of abortion, where we've glaringly left out the fathers, as if these women are getting pregnant all by themselves. But I also think, I don't know how old you are. I'm 46, and the first time I knew what the President of the United States was my dad explaining why Richard Nixon was resigning. And I think I think that did something to our entire nation. Losing the moors and the moorings of our own top leadership, I think really had a devastating effect on the entire country, especially when it comes to children respecting their elders. But on the other hand, we've seen the same thing with the church. The more we have moral failings in the church, the less people respect the authority as well.
Absolutely.
So when you've got failings in both the politics and the religious side of what we've come to know as the, quote, controllers of society, where do you turn for leadership and mentorship and guidance and leadership other than to yourself? And I think that's why a lot of people do turn to crime as well, because there's not a voice out there representing them. It's a voice of those who fund the Heritage Foundation. It's a voice of those who fund NARAL. It's a voice that funds, Planned Parenthood. We can even say GLAAD. It's those who fund organizations that tell us what to think. That's where we're at now.
It's both sides that do it, though, Brian. It's not just the liberal. It's not just the conservative. Both sides push their agenda, which leads us perfectly into the last section of the show on the separation of church and state. Let me just give the number out once more if anybody wants to call in. Maybe they're just afraid. It's 347-884-9061. That's 347. My brain went dead. 884-9061. Now, the separation of church and state is the distance in the relationship between organized religion and the nation state. Now, although this concept has been adopted in a number of countries, there are varying degrees dependent on legal structures and views towards the role of religion in society. Now, while policy may be to have a definite distinction in church and state, there may be an arm's-length distance relationship in which the two entities interact independently. The liberal interpretation depends upon a traditional formal definition of religion, especially when it pertains to prayer or the use of the Bible, versus a less substantial ideology such as secular humanism that seeks separation of church from state, as well as the presumption that the state can almost absolutely separate from the former and its distinctive morality, and that the overall history of the church and state for almost 150 years did not manifest the founders' interpretation of the First Amendment, but was in violation of it. Surely in a country where a multitude of religions are practiced, and in order to recognize the rights of those who do not practice any form of religion, there needs to be a clear and definitive separation, and in order to ensure the rights of all are not affected by the beliefs of the few. So I know this is one of your favorite subjects, Brian, in light of your specialist field of equality. Tell us what your perception is of separation of church and state and is actually occurring in our great nation.
Well, I think it's perfectly fine to be a religious person holding a political office and making decisions guided by what you believe your religion teaches you, as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution. In other words, you could be a Mormon and believe in polygamy as long as you don't have more than one wife. You can be, let's say it like this, the only way to separate church and state is to only elect atheists to office. And I'm not sure that would be any more beneficial than to have, we can never have a Muslim, or we can never have a Jew, we can never have a Christian elected as well.
Oh, God forbid, not Jews in power. that was a joke before all the Jews call in and call me an anti-Semitic Jew. But carry on, Brian. Right. Sorry, I digress.
I really think it's like the Supreme Court said. I think this is a good example. The 1862 Moral and that's MORRILL, Anti-Bigamy Act was passed by Congress that said nationwide, which of course we were not yet 50 states when that was passed, but nationwide, more than one spouse is going to be illegal. And they specifically targeted the Mormon practice of polygamy. The Mormons said, well, we have the right, the religious right, to believe in our marriages to be construed the way our Lord and our scriptures say they should be, which permit polygamy. And so they sued the nation based on the First Amendment of freedom of religion. And the Supreme Court justice in that said, you are free to believe in polygamy all you want to, but the government has a compelling state interest since it's also responsible for governing divorce and property separation and child custody. They have a compelling state interest in that case to prevent more than one spouse at a time as a civil contract.
Right.
So
go on.
I was going to say, another example, that's one way of looking at it. Another one is, look at Mark Sanford. He's a governor of South Carolina.
Do I have to?
Hello?
Yeah, he said, do I have to?
Sorry. Yeah, but Mark Sanford's the governor of South Carolina, state in the United States. And let's say the United States said for adultery, the Bible says adulterers should be stoned, and so we're going to stone Mark Sanford. But the Bible also says the adulterer and the adulteress. So we're going to stone.
You're saying they should be stoned, but what if it's not legal in that state?
What if it's not legal in Argentina? Because his mistress was in Argentina.
No, I meant the use of marijuana. I was being funny.
Oh, sorry.
Stoned.
Okay, can I start this over? This is a really strong point. If I can just get all the way through it. Suppose you're a governor of the state of South Carolina, and in America, we don't have separation in church and state. Instead, we go everything by the Bible. The Bible says a man who commits adultery, the adulterer and the adulteress should be put to death. Leviticus 20:10. So Mark Sanford and his Argentinian adulteress are going to both be stoned. So what are we going to do? Bring the mistress to America to stone her? And what if Argentina doesn't like that? What if Argentina does have separation of church and state? And that's the other side of that. So anyway, that's why I think we need it to be separated. And I think that the only time that we really hear of separation of church and state not being supported is when folks have a difference of opinion and they try to impose that based on whatever scripture they go to.
So if we have the constitutional right of separation of church and state, why do so many in the ruling classes try to circumvent that? You know, when Bush was in power, he a few times he said about, as a Christian nation we should blah blah blah. We're not a Christian nation. You know, we are a multi-faith nation. So if you're running the country as a Christian and making your decisions from a Christian perspective, surely there are some people you're not representing fully.
Exactly. Well, and not only that, but Jesus was a Jew, and he left here a Jew, and he's coming back as a Jew. So for a Christian nation, we really technically would be a Jewish nation. So
all the best people are Jewish, Brian, I have to tell you.
I know, right? Everybody that wrote the Bible was a Jew. I like Jewish people. But, you know, even Oral Roberts, I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he was a famous evangelist. Even Oral Roberts in 2004 is on tape saying, America is not a Christian nation. It's a nation with lots of Christians in it. And that's really how I think Christians should look at it. Yeah. We're all here. You know, they complain about taking prayers out of school, and they say that's why we're having all these problems in the country. But the truth is we had problems before we took prayer out of school.
Of course we did.
And secondly, we've got more than just Christian children in school. We can't force Jews and Muslims and atheists in school to pray Christian prayers. But they don't. You know, it sounds good in a sermon, but it is not, some things that sound good in church just do not work in the public sphere under our Constitution. They're free to say it,
because you can't have always, but this is, I have big beefs about the Constitution. because I think I think it was written to be a working document and therefore subject to change and update. But a lot of people see that as the Holy Grail, which to me is kind of, it's a bit spaced out to imagine that a document that's over 200 years old would still be exactly as relevant 200 years after. But the other point of this for me is, why do those people with religious beliefs feel their ideology should be paramount in the running of the country? Because if you're making, we'll talk a little bit about gay marriage because I know it's one of your beefs too. But why should the ruling classes be able to make decisions and make laws based upon what they feel is right on a Christian perspective or a moral perspective when maybe the rest of the country doesn't share that ideology?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, like I say, I look at the scriptures and I actually see gay marriage being ordained for Christians, but not for Jews and not for Muslims, So even if the Bible supported gay marriage, it's only going to apply to Christians. Well, what about everybody else? It's still not a basis for constitutional law. And the real source of separation of church and state, because we've got to remember a lot of things that happened in America happened while we were still colonists living under the British throne. And under the British throne, everybody was either Church of England or Catholic.
Right.
And so everyone who came to America was either Protestant or Catholic. So separation of church and state was designed to say we're not going to have the same conflicts between Catholics and Protestants that we've had in Spain and in England. Instead, in America, you can be either a Catholic or a Protestant. And that's really how it started. And I think a lot of people will say, see, that means the Constitution gave you freedom of religion, but it only meant you were free to choose which Christian religion you wanted to belong to.
Which to me, that's just BS, isn't it, basically?
I agree.
Because what about democracy, freedom, and liberty? What about all of those things? How many elements of the Constitution are in conflict with each other?
Well, and that's the thing, too, is that a lot of there's one historian, I'm not going to name his name, but he turns to a lot of events that happened and statements that were made by judges and governors of people that spoke and were quoted before the Constitution was signed and said, see, this is why we're a Christian nation. See, this is why the Bible was the basis of our Constitution. See, this is why we should be doing it. Well, that was before the Constitution was written. A lot of people that you speak to just don't pay that much attention to it. They just take it as gospel, and what we see instead is he's added to the cue card that you're supposed to read from. And so, it's like Mark Twain says, a lie gets around the world before the truth can get its pants on.
I've got no time for cue cards. One thing I do want to ask you, though, Brian, because I think it's a pertinent question, is do you think some of the confusion and opposition to same-sex unions is because of people not being sure of the difference between legal marriage and holy matrimony?
No, I'm convinced that those who oppose gay marriage do so to build their clique. That's all they care about. When it really comes down to it, most of the things that divide our country are based on each side having, somebody else on their side. Will you read these cue cards? Yes, you're on our side. And that's really all they're interested in. They need the conflict in order to build their team. They could care less. I think most of them could care less if two gay people get married or not. But what they say in the public square is designed to line their feathers, basically, and like I say, grow more team members. And so that's why I think we can have such outrageous statements being made about gay people and gay marriage, and nobody really even blinks an eye because even those people don't believe it. They're saying it because that's, like I said, that's what their team says. Their team is red, so they have to, everything they say has to be red.
But
the other team is blue, so everything they say.
Right. But the funny thing is, if it's a if they're saying it's a constitutional issue, then there's a separation of church and state, so that the issue is totally moot anyway. My second argument on that issue is that there's no gender clarification in the Constitution with reference to marriage anyway, is there? It doesn't say a man and a woman. All this about it's implied, You can't,
right,
you can't say it's implied.
Yeah, if Justice Scalia asked, I think it was Scalia, asked during the DOMA hearing, when did gay marriage become constitutional? And the lawyer couldn't answer his question. He said, well, I don't know. We have DOMA because we were trying to say, because basically the Constitution did not explicitly ban gay marriage, so they added DOMA because they knew it didn't. So my answer to Scalia would be gay marriage became constitutional on July 4th, 1776.
Right.
And DOMA, like I say, that's why they want to leave marriage to the states, because both parties know they can get a lot more mileage out of it, because everybody who runs for office, every campaign, they're going to buy flyers and TV commercials, and so they get a lot of mileage out of building their team based on these issues. And that's the toxicity of our politics, is really what we see the results of nowadays, I think. The country is more polarized than ever. Nobody seems to be making any sense. Our government has become so gridlocked they can't really come together and agree on anything much. And, I think our society is suffering as a result. On one hand, if I were anybody anywhere else in the world, I'd be looking at America and be like, boy, if the big dog on the planet can't get it together, how can any of us, which really I think diminishes hope for people when America should be a beacon of hope instead. And on the other hand, I think there are so many people in America that say, you know what, we don't really have to lead or anything because we're the richest nation on earth. We can do what we want and take as long as we need to do it. And,
but it's not. But in reality, it's not like that, is it? I mean, for as far as I'm concerned, for a lot of people, it's about the label of marriage. But for me, as a gay person, it's actually more. You can call it blancmange if you want. You can call it double fudge brownie. But I want the same rights as you, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm not even going to get that petty. Even if you don't want to call it marriage, if you want to call it something else, then call it. But give me exactly the same rights. If it makes you feel better to call it wall-to-wall carpeting for gay people, then call it that, but just give rights. Because that seems to me it's more about feeling comfortable for some of these people.
I used to adopt that position, saying that let's get what marriage provides without calling it marriage. Until you get ready to fill out a federal tax form, it asks, are you single or married? There are no other options. So either we're married or we're not. And so for me, that reason alone is enough to demand that we continue to call it marriage. The other reason is because, honestly, if I can be frank, I'm not fighting for a half-baked version of marriage for the next generation of LGBT people that come around.
I don't disagree with you, Brian.
For all I know, reincarnation may be true, and if I come back, I want to get married,
Right. I don't necessarily disagree with you, Brian. I'm just saying to you that what I'm trying to do is not to be as petty as those people that would oppose us. That's what I'm saying. For me, it's about the label that's attached to it. It's about the rights that you're stealing from me.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I just think that that kind of an attitude is bowing to pressure that really doesn't even exist. Those who say, we don't want to use the word marriage because marriage is sacred, come on. Gay people getting married is not going to affect Donald Trump and Larry King and Newt Gingrich or their 16 wives.
I
about marriage is sacred.
Let's not get started on Donald Trump on this show because
I know, right?
I could be here all day. Him and his bad wig, allegedly.
He's a good example or a good microcosm of what I think has happened in the country. We've grown so fat and wealthy, we just don't care anymore. And it's all about being, honestly, I don't even know what Donald's problem is. I think maybe it's just to get people to tune into The Apprentice.
His face. That's what his problem is.
I just don't understand the otherwise, How somebody can get that far and still say such ignorant things. I don't think he believes half of what he says. He just says.
I don't. I think it's about being popular and getting people to follow him. I mean, I won't watch his after some of the stuff is said. I won't watch his show. But again, that's that's a different issue.
Yeah.
So let's summarize. We've talked today about abortion, the death penalty, and separation of state. And although we've agreed on a lot of things, we've still we haven't actually agreed on everything, but still we have the consensus of opinion that this is still America, and we've got the right to believe and feel what we want to believe and feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom right. The fundamental right of every human being is the right to have a conscience. I really do believe that. A right to have a conscience and to voice it. Whether or not you act on it, you can act on it within the limits of the law, because, it's like they say, your right to throw your fist ends at the front of my nose. So you're right. I think we've agreed that there's a lot of gray areas that it's hard to, black and white come down onto agreement with. There's a lot to explore, and I think a lot of it's uncharted territory. I don't think we have very much institutional exploration of those gray areas, and maybe we should.
Absolutely. So Brian, tell people where they can find you on the interweb, and tell people where they can find your book, The Bedkeeper, and a little bit about what it's about.
Well, The Bedkeeper, it's called the book is called The Bedkeeper: A Biblical Case for Gay Marriage, and what it does is explore scriptures that show, it appears to me, showing gay marriage being ordained by the Apostle Paul in the Bible. It is designed to explore the scriptures, but it goes far beyond gay marriage. And so the blog spot, it's called thebedkeeperbook.blogspot.com. So the blog is being updated. It continues to evolve. It's really a work in progress. But the book is available at Amazon.com. The blog you can get to either through thebedkeeperbook.blogspot.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at thebedkeeper for the latest. Because, like I say, it's kind of a fluid situation. It's starting to evolve, and I'll be giving some updates via Twitter on what we're doing to basically reflect progress that I've noticed throughout the church as they start to get the message and they start to wake up and say, oh, wow, not only does it ordain gay marriage, but there's all these other things about gay people that we've missed. And
so your website, Brian, what's your website address? So just so people can link it all together.
It's BrianBowenMinistries.com, BrianBowen Ministries.com. Brian Bowen,
and they can find that link on your Twitter page too.
No, the link on my Twitter page goes to the blog.
Right.
So there's the website and then there's the blog. The blog is thebedkeeperbook.blogspot.com, and
cool.
It is kind of the master file of the book that's available on Amazon. The book on Amazon is basically a condensed version of the blog, but the blog is absolutely free, has a lot more information, and we'll probably end up re-releasing the book with an updated version. I'll let you guys know that through Twitter as well.
Well, if you tweet that information, Brian, I'll retweet it so all the listeners can get to you. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and you have a fabulous week.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. Well, that was author Brian Bowen. Check out his book, The Bedkeeper, and also make sure you follow him on Twitter at The Bedkeeper, capital T, capital B, capital K. We are at the very last couple of minutes of the show now for What's Your Beef? Who's pissed you off this week? What's your problem? Maybe it's me. Maybe it's somebody else. I know there were people in the chat talking about problems and issues that they have. Feel free to call in 347-884-9061. That's 347-884-9061 for the very, very last section of the show, just while people are finding the number and looking to call in. I'd like to remind you of my friend who is in the chat room and her blog. Check it out, kathyreynolds.simplesite.com. That's kathyreynolds.simplesite.com. I'll spell the first bit for you, KathyReynolds.simplesite, SIMPLESITE.com. Make sure you check out her blog. It's a fabulous read. Who hates me, Kathy? It says, thanks, Xander. She hates Xander, I think. Who hates me? Oh, Rachel. Yeah, Rachel hates me. She hates me because we are one. Oh, Carly hates me. I see. I love everybody. Well, it is the last section of the show. We're going to take some calls if anybody wants to call in. 347-884-9061. Do you have the balls to call us and tell us what's your beef, what you're happy about, what you're not happy about? We're going to give you a couple more minutes to do that. Just while we wait to see if anybody calls, my guest next week is the fabulous, wonderful comedian from Boston, no stranger to our show, Will Noonan. He will be back with us next week to talk about funny stuff and to make us laugh in general. And the week after that, we will be having John and Gina Loudon, Dr. Loudon and Senator Loudon on the show, who were on the TV show Wife Shot Swap a couple of weeks ago. They will be our guests in 2 weeks' time, so make sure you mark that one down in your diaries. I don't think we're getting any calls. Nobody dares call in. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Joe says, I have to go. Can't even wait for someone to call and bitch. Take care, everyone. Bye, Joe. Bye to Kathy. Bye to Rachel, my evil twin, or maybe you're my non-evil twin. Those in the know will know what we're talking about. Thanks to Kathy. Thanks to Travis. Thanks to everybody for tuning in this week. We will be back with you next week, 2 p.m. PST, 5 p.m. EST, for the very best in talk radio. I'm your host, Xander Gibb, and I love you all. Bye-bye.
Love, it has been good to me this time around. Things were never bound to change when it was found.